How many people, is there any particular questions? I'll utilize this time while Vanessa's trying to rapidly discover how to get on board. Is there any particular questions on folios that you guys would want answered today? Oh, the topic is folios, by the way, in case anyone didn't know what the topic today was going to be. The topic is going to be on folios. Is there any particular topic that any particular question that people are keen for us to address or answer?
I'd love to and I don't know if it's going to be covered or not, but just talk about how you highlight experiences when your folio is potentially from diverse backgrounds, so not necessarily from design or whatever, but the experiences, say, in different career roles.
Okay. We'll come back to that one. It's not one that I think we've particularly had listed in it. We're potentially going to be exploring more, I think, some of the frequent and common mistakes that we're seeing coming up. I just realised which Vicky it is. Hello. How are you? Nice to see you. So yeah, that might be an interesting one for us to come back to. But Antonio, I'll make sure we do come back to that one for you.
Cheers.
We'll just give it a minute or so for Vanessa to get back in. You realise that she's probably stressing out at the moment, poor lady.
Well, I'm not sure if you guys will cover it, but I was wondering, for example, if all I've ever done is logo design, and if I want to get a job in another discipline in graphic design, and I haven't done branding or social media content, if I do personal projects, number one, should I highlight that these are personal projects? I think I should. But what are the pros and cons of having more personal projects in your portfolio than actual client work?
Look, that's a really good question, because obviously the point of a folio is about commercial work.
Yes.
However, you're absolutely right. If you've got an ambition to move towards a new industry sector and you don't have experience within that industry sector, the best way to give an indication as to how you might approach that work would be to do some personal projects. Do you label personal projects? Absolutely. I would clearly label personal projects as personal projects. Oh, I can see Vanessa is in on her phone. There you are.
Hi.
Yay, we can hear you. And there was much rejoicing. Much rejoicing. I was just saying it'd be cruelly ironic if you weren't able to do this one, given that this is a topic that... In fact, Vanessa's done a video on our YouTube page that I think is probably one of our most viewed videos, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. How to make your portfolio stand out.
And it's about 2 years old now, 3 years old.
I updated it again last year because I send it out to so many different people, and everyone says it really, really helps. So it was perfect having a webinar for it today.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of a refresh on all that, but it's great that now you're able to join us, Vanessa.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's Lawrence and I tested it this morning and it worked. So that's technology for you.
Yeah.
But just a little bit of admin. I can't see the comments on the side, Lawrence. So
that's okay. Look, I'll just multitask. It just means that if you do add a comment to the side and we don't get to it immediately, please know that we will come back to that. So it's 5 past. Let's make a move and start on this. As I mentioned before, today's topic is going to be on folios. Let me just share my screen here. Share, and let me just present this. Can everyone see that okay? Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Excellent. So this is one where Vanessa and I have, again, like last week, it's very conversational. We haven't really rehearsed or practiced this at all. In fact, it was probably one of the easier ones for us to put together because it's a topic that we talk about so often. Antonio, Cassius, we will come back to respond to your questions towards the end. And obviously, if anyone else has any other questions as we go through this, please feel free to type in the comments or unmute and say something. All good. So today we're going to be covering a few points here. Why your folio is as important as your CV. Vanessa's going to be looking at the layout of your folio. I've got there the top 10 discussion points around folio, which Vanessa and I will no doubt do a bit of banter between each other on. And then questions at the end. So let's get into this. Why your folio is as important as your CV. This might seem really, really obvious, but you'll be amazed how often people get it wrong, or how often I put a job ad up for a graphic designer and people don't send me any form of folio or any examples of work. So really your folio is a reflection of both your best and your most practical work. It's essentially, as I've got there, a greatest hits along with your bread and butter work. But it's essentially also a promotional tool. Combined with your own personal brand, this gives a flavor of what you can achieve. This kind of goes to what, Cassius's question was before about including, project work or personal work in there. That's about that flavor of what you give, that you bring to a project. So, are we starting off with my top 10 discussion? Have I got my slides out of sequence?
No, they've gone ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, we'll go to your one. There you go. Is that right? Is that up to you now?
Yes, that is up to me, but that was quick.
This is so professionally organized today, isn't it? Wow.
It's technology and just the way it is working from home. So look, when laying your work out on a website, a not so great way to do it is to actually put every single piece of work on there with without organizing it. When we're looking for work, as Lawrence said before, sometimes we could be looking for a graphic designer for a specific client, or for an agency that has a specific client. Then we want to see the relevant work. If you just have absolutely everything up there and we have to try and get through it, then it's very, very difficult. So what is good, and this is my opinion, is to organize your work. And what I mean by that is you can organize it either by industry or by medium. So if you were going to organize it by industry, perhaps the type of clients that you had worked for could be retail. So then you have a tab there called retail, and you have all your retail work under that. You could have another one for fashion, another one for automotive, whatever it is that you specialize in. And I'm sure being a creative designer, you don't just specialize in one industry. You may, but usually everybody has touched on different types of industries and different types of work. So that's one way of laying it out. Another way of laying it out could be by medium. So if you are an editor, you may have more TVCs in there. So then you could label it by medium, which is TVCs, and then you have another label for print, all the print work in there, digital with all the digital, and Lawrence's favorite, catalogs, where you could actually show all your catalog work in there. Now, I'm sure you will agree that that's much easier than just having it all there and for us to go through, or for the client to go through. Because Lawrence may only be looking for a graphic designer that's done catalogue work. I may only be looking for a graphic designer that's done a print ad for an automotive client. So it's easier for us and the clients to actually go through that, to go through your portfolio to find the work that's relevant for that particular role.
Do you need me to turn to the next slide?
No, any questions on that one? I think I just saw a question pop up. I don't know how that works on my phone.
Okay, let me have a look and see. Yes, there are chats here. How how do we approach portfolios for studios, recruitment agencies, and a variety of corporate companies? Asks Elizabeth.
I think by organizing your work in one of the ways that I've discussed here on this page, because you're going after different types of people. You're going after a corporate client. The corporate client could only be interested in annual reports. Then you need to show them annual reports, and TVCs are not going to be relevant. If you're going to a design agency, they may only be looking for logos and style guides. So you need to show that. It really is going to be dependent on what you're capable of and what the particular job is that you're going for.
I think it's important
then
to
in that case, I would actually...
No, go for it, Vanessa, sorry.
Yeah. Then in that case, you may not, if you're going for a specific job, you may not just send your website with everything on it. You may tailor a PDF to that, for that particular client and for that particular role, whether it's direct to the client, direct to the agency, or direct to the recruiter. So it's not one thing fits all in that case. Any other questions on that one? And I hope I answered that one correctly.
If I could ask something, this may be a but is there a problem having too many, even if you categorize everything specifically, is there a con in having too many, a large verse of work that gives the impression that you're basically just a jack of all trades?
That question was cutting in and out for me a little bit there, sound-wise. Was anyone else able to hear that question? Sorry, Cassius, I might get you just to repeat that one.
Okay, so is there such thing of having too much different types of work, to give the employer an impression that you're just a jack of all trades?
I get what you're asking now. Is it possible if you present too much that people might think you're more of a generalist as opposed to a specialist? Is that what you mean? Yeah, cool. Look, I think the general answer I'd say is this. When you're applying for a role, in the same way that you would tailor your CV, you're likely to tailor your folio as well. Now, Vanessa's spoken quite extensively about an online version of your folio. And if you have, if you're more of a designer who has worked across a lot of different things, and maybe view yourself as being more of a generalist, then I imagine that you'd probably look at doing your website via the medium. So the TVCs, the print, the digital. Whereas if you are more specialist in a particular industry sector, it might be smarter for you to look at doing something like, okay, I'm going to do the retail sector. And with that, I'm going to show my examples of catalogs and retail point of sale and, wobblers and all that sort of thing as well. I don't think there's necessarily a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. I think it's got to be done on a case-by-case basis. But I would generally say that if you are someone who has done one type of medium across lots of industry sectors, would break it up by industry sectors, as opposed to if you're someone who's done lots of different mediums, you'd break it up via medium. And in fact, when we're talking about PDFs, I would generally say to someone, if you've got like a 40-page PDF folio, you probably want to look at breaking that down into various different, whether it be packaging or retail design or, text-heavy documents, all that sort of thing. Karen asks, when I design a campaign, I make 3 creatives. Should I showcase all the creative in my portfolio? Again, there's no one-size-fits-all answer to this. I would tend to say that if you're trying to show your conceptual skills, and sometimes showing the development of the idea is a good thing. However, it depends on, I guess, the work and the client and what it was. What's your thoughts, Vanessa?
That is. There's not one size fits all again on that one. If you are an art director and looking for an advertising agency job, I would say yes. If there's 3 different executions, then show that. I wouldn't show all the different sizes and mediums that it's on, but I would show the 3 executions if they were all different. But again, it's going to be dependent. But I like to see 3 different executions if it's an advertising campaign. Yes.
Now, Nikki and Ruth have both asked questions that we will come back to. So perhaps if you feel that, Nikki and Ruth, if you feel that we haven't sufficiently answered that question when we get to that, then please feel free to pop up and re-ask that question. So what's the next slide, Vanessa? Is it you or me?
The next slide is actually me. It's in regards to free websites. We can get to this one and then we can go back to all the other questions that we had, which answer everybody else's questions. So, you know, when some people say, oh, I don't have a website because you have to pay for it. But these days, there's so many free websites. And my favorites are Squarespace and Wix for print work. You can also show TVCs and videos on this. I like these ones because they you can tailor them to your own needs. Vimeo, I also like if you're an editor or if you have only done TVCs, then you definitely need a Vimeo, and that is free. So I've put all those links on there. There's really no excuse not to have a great website that looks good when you have these free website templates available, and you didn't have to design them. There's so many different designs to choose from. So we can now go to all the questions that we had there, Lawrence. I think the top 10 discussions, and I think that will answer a few of the questions that we had there.
Yeah, I reckon if we jump into the okay, well, Tim's we'll answer Tim's question here and we'll jump into the top 10. If the role is, say, for a digital role, is it pointless putting in any print, catalogue, branding, etc.?
I can answer this one. I don't think it is a problem. I think it showcases that you are conceptual and it will showcase your creative ability. I think if you are going for those digital roles, show more work that is actually relevant for that role, but to have the other work there, if it's on the website or towards the end of the PDF, to show your breadth and width as a creative. What are your thoughts on that one, Lauren?
I was about to say, you know what's interesting, Tim, is that a lot of these questions that we're going to get asked today is probably going to have Vanessa and I having differing opinions.
Yeah, that's true.
Quite often there'll be this. We'll have discussions in the office sometimes that are very, very different. Look, my thoughts would be, you know, if you're applying for the job, then you probably know who the company is. You probably know a little bit about what the company is looking for or expecting. And you'd play it by a case-by-case basis. You know, if they're looking solely for a digital designer, then make sure you give them the digital work upfront first and foremost, and maybe go into some of that print stuff to showcase your history or your background, or even if you feel that print stuff is able to give a bit of an idea about the aesthetic that you do with print. But if it's not necessary, I wouldn't necessarily include it either. So that's possibly where Vanessa and I differ just a little bit on that. Doesn't mean that either of us are particularly right or wrong. I think it's just about looking. It's hard sometimes to answer some of these because it is going to be a case-by-case basis, even with clients. So
yeah, I think what we can agree on
can we?
is, yes, I'm pretty sure on this one, Lawrence, that, you know, personal work, wedding invitations and videos filmed for friends and weddings and stuff like that is not relevant for most jobs that we have. So yeah, can we agree on that one, Lawrence?
Yep, I think so. Now, John's asked a question as well, and we'll get How about, because I think this one's kind of touched upon in the 10 points as well. So
Okay.
we'll come back to that one and see how it goes. So this is a part that how can I not get back? Okay. Oh, that's better. Good. Oh, phew. Bit of a freak out there. Okay. Today's one's been a really good test run.
We're having fun today, Lawrence.
Yeah, it's a day for it, isn't it, Vanessa? So these are my top 10 discussion points around folios, and these are some of the most common mistakes that I see. Hopefully we'll cover some of the ones, the questions being asked as well, and as I mentioned, if not, I have the feeling we're going to have a lot of questions at the end of this, which is great. Firstly, as I mentioned earlier, attach your folio and job applications. This might seem obvious, but you'd be amazed how many job applications we get, particularly for graphic design roles, where they haven't attached a folio. And it makes it really, really difficult for us to be able to notice if someone's going to be right for the role or not. So really obvious point, but if you're applying for a job, make sure you have some form of folio there, whether it's a PDF or an online version that you're going to be able to include. If it is a website, make sure the URL works. Again, this might seem really obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I've clicked on a URL and it doesn't work. Either the page not found, or it's expired, or, and, you know, really when you think about it, when you're sending through a job application, this is kind of a moment of truth where if someone's clicking on a link and expecting it to work and it doesn't, it's kind of reflective of your attention to detail.
Yeah.
So it's really important to make sure little details like your website actually being there has been covered.
And can I just add to that one as well, Lawrence?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when we do click on the website and we go into the different types of work, those links may not be there. Sometimes, especially when I'm looking at TVCs, if they're linked back to somewhere else where they're hosted, a lot of those times those links aren't working. So you really should, go through don't just put everything on your website and expect it all to be okay. Check it every couple of months. Make sure the links are still working within the website.
Absolutely. Another thing I notice is that I know people often finding the time to update their folio can be challenging, and knowing what to put in there. And, in a lot of cases, people might even procrastinate a little bit around their folio. But in many cases, I see people say things like "coming soon," and that's really not acceptable if you're applying for a job. You have to have something to show then and there. The other thing, Instagram is not a folio. The number of people that send us to like an Instagram account and say, "This is my folio." I get that it's a great place to showcase some of your work. But in terms of being able to find what it is that we might be looking for to indicate that you're going to be perfect for that job, you're making hiring managers work twice as hard as what they need to be able to do that. So definitely don't do that. A lot of people put passwords on their folio websites. And, this is probably the one that might divide people. I tend to ask, is a password actually necessary? Because it means that we have to sometimes backtrack to try to find that password in order to look at that website. What's your thoughts, Vanessa?
I do understand that some pieces of work in the folio may have to have a password, or may not, may be sensitive. In that case, then I wouldn't show it on the website. I would actually either show it face-to-face when you're meeting the recruiter or the person that you're going for the job with, because I know some work is sensitive, especially in advertising. Some of the work may not have been released yet, but you'd worked on it a month ago. So I do understand that some work is sensitive, but I don't think the whole website needs a password. I agree with Lawrence. Having to do 1 or 2 steps or going back to find the password is messy, really.
Let's have a look here. So show diversity in your work, and I've got there not 10 pages of press ads. And I guess this kind of touches upon the question that you were asking as well, Cassius, is that I once received a folio that had approximately 20 pages of press ads. Now, you can gather that by page 2, I kind of knew that this person could do press ads, but by page 20, it made me think, is this person only doing press ads? And that's not the impression that you necessarily want the folio to give. So it can be a challenge when you don't have that experience commercially, but that's where those personal projects might be useful as well. So what did you do on the work? This comes back to Nikki's question. Don't leave it for people to guess what your involvement was on the work. I would generally include some form of blurb to explain what your involvement was with it. And to give an example of that, you know, sometimes I open up a folio and I might see just a press ad, and I have no idea if the person did the concept for it, or if they did some of the elements within it, or if they did the finished art on it, or if they did it by themselves, or if they did it with a team, or what it was. So I think it's important to have just a little bit of an idea about what your involvement was within that.
Yeah, I agree with that, Lawrence, and especially for creatives who have been working at advertising agencies. We all know that an ad is not made just by one person. You have the copywriter, you have the art director, you have the creative director, and it could be a very specialized piece of work where there was an animator or you know, some sort of visual effects. And I think if you're showing that work on your website, you should credit other people on that as well, as you would want to be credited for that work on somebody else's website.
I think this also, I haven't written it here, but I think this also touches on being honest about your work as well. Because I've had folios in the past from different people with the same work in it, and both of them claiming to have done that work.
Yeah.
So someone's not telling me the truth somewhere there. And I can even think of an instance with you, Vanessa, where someone tried to claim work on something that unfortunately for them you had done.
Yeah.
So, you know,
they were black banned pretty quickly from
I think in that instance you knew who wasn't telling the truth in that particular situation. So I think it's important to make sure you are honest about what work you're doing.
Yeah.
Your folio is for commercial work. And when I say that, I mean that, you know, sometimes I'll see folios that have in it other artistic pursuits in it. And that's great. You know, it's awesome that you're a creative soul and you're passionate. But the folio is meant to be a sales tool. And when you're putting in these non-essential art pieces, you're actually making it more about you and less about it being a sales tool. Does that make sense?
I also agree with you. You made a point before, Lawrence, that, you know, it's showing your capability and what is going to get you what we call the bread and butter. You know, it is the, you know, life drawings really showcasing you as a digital designer or a graphic designer? Probably not. The wedding invitations that you did for 10 people of your friends and family, is that going to be relevant? Probably not. But if it is on your website, you can have that under a whole different section saying personal, and people can look into that or not look into it.
And I don't you hate it when you have a point in your head and then suddenly it flies out again? But I know it's probably going to come back in about 10 minutes time, where I'll suddenly have to do some sort of linkage backtracking there. Show your conceptual thinking. This comes back to Karen's question before as well. You know, I'm occasionally asked by clients to show them folios of conceptual designers. So for a moment, think about what that might mean for you if you were asked by a client to show a folio that highlights your conceptual ability. What would you actually do to do that? In my mind, I was looking for people that can showcase their ideation. So whether it be about the development of an idea, or if they're showing the conceptual initial sketches and how it kind of expands. And this is also interesting to think about for people like retouchers, for instance. If you're doing a retouching folio, don't just provide the after shot, because I don't know what you've done. You know, I want to see what the before and after shots were so I can kind of match it. I'm going to go, oh, wow, yeah, this guy's really been able to take this image in a whole new direction. I can see Vanessa's dying to say something here. So.
No, I'm agreeing. I'm agreeing with everything, especially the retouching. You can see the before and after and how many elements have been used. Was it just a colour retouch, or was it a total, you know, background, foreground, people, buildings, objects, retouching? That makes a huge difference.
I just remembered what that point was that I was going to say before. And that was about folio size when it's a PDF. I've actually received a folio in the past from someone that was about 100 pages. It included their poetry and their IQ score because for some reason they felt that this was going to be absolutely essential in understanding that they were a creative being. And, you know, I could see some of the reactions even from the faces at the moment that, you know, 100 pages is a bit excessive. Like, I almost feel like I need to get a cut lunch and go and sit down in the garden and flick through that for an hour or so because it's just so much. No one's going to go through 100 pages. So it's really about making sure that you can narrow it down to a good selection of pieces that are going to highlight both your conceptual creative ability, those wow pieces, versus those more practical bread and butter pieces that you would expect clients to utilize your skills for as well.
And also, you know, if I was looking through a folio that was 100 pages, the resolution would probably not be that good for you to be able to email us a PDF. And we're coming into that discussion next, which is going to be super exciting for Lawrence and I. But, you know, if you are sending through a PDF, please be aware of the size. You know, I think around 10 megabytes is the maximum for people to get through their emails. I know Lawrence and I have received links, you know, to download PDFs, and sometimes they've been like 150 megabytes. I mean, that's when we do have to go out and get our lunch and come back and wait for it to download. That's just crazy.
Yeah, it's as bad as opening Word on a Mac, isn't it? You might as well go and make a cup of coffee and come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving on to, because Vanessa and I have had differing opinions on this particular topic of PDF versus online. Some of you here have been long enough in the game. You probably were carrying around A2 books and, you know, getting some sort of back support to carry such a heavy book around. Nowadays, it's kind of easier with the options of PDF and online. I personally am still a fan of PDF. And the reason why is because I believe that you can tailor it to guide the viewing journey of the person looking at it. So if you're applying for a job that's looking for a packaging person, for instance, or, you know, I can see a particular person here at the moment. I know they've got great experience in property. So, you know, he could design a folio that is going to focus on the property work first and then go back through his other vast and very good career, I might add, as well. So, you know, it's really about being able to take control over the viewing of the pieces. Whereas online, of course, you can fit so much more on it. And if it's being laid out in a way that is, you know, logical, then I think that can work to a benefit as well.
I agree. I'm a big fan of online because you can make it high resolution and everything looks great. And then if you go back to what I said before, you can organize it either by medium or by industry. So I still think PDFs are great, especially if you're going for something very specific. Like Lawrence said before, maybe you are going for a role at a property company or a design agency that specializes in property, then just make a PDF of all your property work and still have a link to your website that showcases everything else. You know, as we keep saying through this webinar, it's not a one size fits all. We have to be adaptable.
And one last bonus point. This is something that actually happened just this morning. And fortunately for me, the person who contacted me was doing it absolutely correctly. But if you're a freelancer and you've been out freelancing for a particular client, then you are, if you're wanting to include that work in your folio from that client, the best thing you're going to do is to be able to ask that client for permission to be able to do that. So I've actually had an experience in the past where someone had been out working for a particular organization. They were about to roll out a whole new campaign. This person had put that campaign in their folio and then circulated it out across every advertising agency before the campaign went live. Now, for many of you, you'd realize that that's a massive no-no. And in fact, that whole campaign had to be pulled as a result of that. So it's really important to make sure that you ask for permission, not just to make sure that you're following proper procedure, but, you know, essentially when you're employed by a business to do freelance work for them, they will retain that intellectual property. So you don't want any legalities that kind of come on there.
Yeah, I agree. We also have one client that we have people freelance with them regularly, and they've actually asked us that they cannot show that work unless they have written approval from the client. So it's super important. It's all about intellectual property and usage rights, and I think that's fair. That's the world in which creatives live in.
So I think we're at the point where we can have a look at these questions now that have been coming through. So firstly, I'll just, oh, there's a lot. Goodness me. Okay. Nikki, did I answer your question about writing blurbs? Is there any other questions you have about that?
Yep. No, that was it. Thank you.
That was all good. And Ruth, have we covered enough about if you have a website, do you need a PDF portfolio for you?
Yeah, I think that's good. I have a website, and I always think, what's 21st century, so woohoo, website. But I might just set up a few PDF templates to be more targeted. So all good. Thanks.
That's a great approach. That's actually a really strategic approach.
Yeah, I like that one too. Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen that video of the newsreader that has the kids coming in the background while he's trying to present from his home study? I'm having that happen with my cats here today. So not only we had the drama going on, but I've got cats constantly using their tray and right in the background. So if I seem distracted, it's because I'm trying to herd cats, literally.
Literally. I did that when I was an account manager.
Yeah. John, thanks for your question as well. I'm not sure if, so you've got, if I've done a lot of work in my previous role for household name national, international companies, however, this work does not represent my best work. Is it confusing to mention these projects in my CV, yet not show these projects in my folio? I think that's fine. I think if you don't feel that this is the best representation of your work, and, you know, in your case, you've been doing this a while and you have some really fabulous work, then I would focus more on the work that is the wow pieces and a bit of the practical, and just mention in the CV. I don't know, but what's your thoughts there, Vanessa?
Again, I think it's really dependent on the role that you're going for and when that work was done. Yeah, if it was done 5-10 years ago and it's not relevant anymore, no, I wouldn't show it. But to write in your CV that you have worked for these clients, because as you said, John, they're big brands, I think that is relevant. But then anybody looking at your CV will see when you worked for those clients and see that it's not so relevant anymore, and your creative work has now superseded that.
This actually flows nicely into a question from Kay. And Kay, lovely to see you here.
Hi, Lawrence. Nice to see you too.
Yeah. So you say some of your great work is now a bit old. Do you leave it out of your folio? And this is actually a great question. It's a good challenge because I generally say, look, you want to try to keep your work perhaps within a 10-year. But, you know, I guess it's a hard one because it really comes down to, does the work look dated? And that's a big challenge, I guess, for anyone, because I know, I guess look at it this way. If you were to open up a folio, because I know that you've been in a position in the past where you would be looking at perhaps bringing some staff in to assist. And if you look at someone's folio and you saw that they had annual reports from 2003, what would your initial reaction be to that? Would you think, why is there not something a little bit more recent? Or is the heyday of their work? Or you kind of get what I mean with that?
Yeah. I mean, this is Kay speaking, but yeah, sure, I do. I guess from a copywriter's point of view, the dating in terms of the style of it might not be initial, it might be conceptually.
I agree. It may not be as relevant when it comes to copywriting, because good copyright is almost timeless in that sense.
I agree with that.
Good, thank you. That's I think an important point of differentiation, because I know it would be completely different for an art director or a designer.
Yeah, correct. I think the only thing is that, you know, sometimes some copy, depending on the age of the copy, will have a certain tone to it that may have been relevant to that period. If it kind of felt like that, then you might want to consider it.
Oh, definitely. Although it's an interesting case in point, because, like, you know, I've been at this for a while, and there were clients that had a very dated tone of voice, which I recommended that they change straight away.
Yeah, I agree. Well, yeah, it's the whole point of copyright, to make sure the tone is fresh and current.
Yeah.
Liz asks, what's your opinion on PowerPoint portfolios to give more of an animated experience? My personal honest reaction is I would steer clear of Microsoft Office, just to be honest with you. Do I have a reason to back that up? Probably not, but I don't know. What does everyone else think?
I think it's I don't think it's appropriate for.
I don't think I've ever received a PowerPoint.
And I think these days in a PDF, PDFs can still be very interactive, and you can have links in there to, you know, digital work from YouTube or wherever else you've housed it. So I think the technology to showcase that in a PDF these days does make PowerPoint obsolete for creatives.
I honestly don't think I've ever had a PowerPoint folio sent through in 15 years. So that's a kind of a novel idea there. But
yeah, I actually saw someone's portfolio that actually had a GIF inside the actual presentation.
As in an animated GIF.
Like.
If it was a meme or something like that, I'd absolutely love it. It would make me giggle. I'd probably think it was unprofessional and inappropriate, but I'd giggle. This makes a silly question. Is Behance a suitable online folio, and do we need to present a website? Vanessa, you're the queen of...
Sorry, I didn't hear that coming through. Sorry,
sorry.
I'm only hearing one.
Yeah. This might be a silly question. Is Behance a suitable online folio, or do we need to present a website?
Who's doing this?
An online folio or a website? What is the difference?
Well, I think they're asking, is Behance a suitable online folio?
No. Look, I mean, online and PDF has all their benefits, as we've discussed today. I'm not quite sure exactly what the question was on that one. Sorry, Lawrence.
It's okay. It's more so if they were using Behance as a folio platform.
Behance. Sorry, no, that's not one of my favorite ones, and it is quite outdated, and I find it difficult to find the work using Behance. I find it, I find the other websites that I suggested, the Squarespace and the Wix, are just presented better. The Squarespace, you just have to put everything in there. It's very difficult to find out. And again, that's just my opinion. What's your thoughts on that one, Lawrence?
I'm not as big a fan of Behance either. I tend to find that I have to go, like, I mean, it's more of a scroll. It's kind of more social media. It doesn't feel as structured, but that's just a personal opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, Squarespace and Wix have really sort of, you know, updated their look and feel since Behance, whereas they haven't really sort of made any major changes.
Okay. Cassius asks, if you're in the middle of creating a logo or a brand for a client, but the job falls through halfway, can you continue and complete the work and label it as a personal project? That's an interesting one. I should begin my answer by saying that I am not an intellectual property lawyer. So I don't know if there are any potential legalities around that. If they were not particularly continuing with the job, I can't see any reason why you may not be able to finish it as personal work. But given that it started as a job, I'm not sure.
Because I could change the name of the company and sort of refine the logo a little bit.
Sorry, you were fading out a little bit there, Cassie.
Oh, sorry. If I had to change the name of the company and refine the logo up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
That'd be all right, right?
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
And then just clearly point out that it was a work in progress and it is your own work, because if it is similar to something that had then been completed, then as Laura said, you might have an intellectual property challenge on your hands with that one. So just be crystal clear at what point, you know, you had that. And that's actually a great example of something that you may not show on your website or on a PDF, but you discuss it in person at the interview.
Sure.
John's asked dimensions for PDFs, A3 horizontal or 16 by 9. I guess it depends on what you anticipate the end viewer being. I would tend to say potentially A3 horizontal.
I think that it's the work that you're showcasing, what does it lend itself to? I think the thing with both Lawrence and I is we've seen online PDFs that were, you know, vertical and then horizontal, a couple of horizontal pages, a couple of vertical pages. It just wasn't consistent. So I think whatever you decide to do with that presentation, just make it consistent. I think that's the best bet. And I don't have a preference to either or.
Okay.
Do you recommend 20 to 30 pieces of work as enough or are enough? Yes, I would generally say that would be enough, 20 to 30 pieces. You want to be able to kind of, as I mentioned, you want to be able to give a greatest hits. You don't want to include every single piece of work that you've done over the course of your career, because that could be quite extensive. However, you want to be able to give an indication about, you know, what kind of design style you have, what kind of work you're capable of doing, what kind of mediums you've worked with, and perhaps even what kind of rollout you've done if you're doing design.
Yeah.
Kay says, as a copywriter, clarity of the PDF is important so it can be read, which makes it tricky to limit the PDF folio to 10 megabytes. Maybe in that instance, what you might do is have a couple of different folios based on different writing styles. Perhaps, and then a website that has a more extensive range. Could that potentially work?
Yeah, I think actually just splitting them up by industry is the way to go.
I agree.
Yeah, thanks.
You can always distill a PDF by exporting it as a PostScript file and opening it via Distiller. This might help reduce the size. I would love to be able to send this out to every single person so they know how to reduce the file size. That would be awesome, because we do get some really big file sizes. And some people are actually really offended when we ask if they can make it smaller.
Yeah.
I have in the past used a separate CV PDF and portfolio sampler PDF, but occasionally use a combined document that has both items within a single PDF. Do you have a preference for separate or combined documents? I personally prefer combined, to be honest. I don't know if there's going to be a general consensus on this. I personally prefer combined.
I don't mind as long as it's thought out properly. Yeah, it's super easy if you have one PDF that contains the CV and showcasing your work. I think that's fantastic. But I'm also okay if it's separate, as long as the CV is not a Word document.
Yeah, we really don't like Word documents. Just to let it be known, especially in the creative industry.
Yeah.
You know, if you're meant to be doing things visually, then absolutely the CV should reflect that as well. So let's have a look here. Have you seen case studies included in portfolios? If so, what are your thoughts? That's a really good question, Wendell.
Yeah.
I have seen case studies. They're great for particular types of design. So if it's about information design, then that case study, which highlights what the brief was and what the aimed outcome was, and everything there is really useful. I think it's really dependent on if there's perhaps some form of strategy involved or something along those lines. A case study can really help to embed that.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't do a case study for every single piece of work, but a couple of case studies in there to show that you are a strategic, conceptual creative is excellent. And, you know, it's great looking through that instead of just looking at all the creative, actually seeing what the challenge was or what the brief was and how you answered it is fantastic for us as recruiters, and also for us to send on to clients.
Yeah. Juan says, is it a good idea to display in your folio your photography skills when you're applying for a graphic design digital role? That's an interesting one. I would probably err on the side of saying no. You can possibly mention within your CV that you do have photography skills, but is that skill going to be necessarily relevant and needed for that role? But again, people might disagree with me on that one.
I actually agree with you. If the role was, you know, for a small business and they needed you to be a photographer and a graphic designer, that is actually the role that they're looking for. Yes. If it's not, then I think, you know, that's a bonus when you are actually working on the job, that you do have those photography skills. But I don't think it can be too much information to receive all at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, if you try and throw 10 tennis balls to somebody, they're maybe going to catch 3, maybe 4. Just try not to throw too much information at people to get at the one time. That could be information overload and not necessary.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, is it true that LinkedIn and Seek have a word search engine to scan keywords in documents submitted by applications? Yes. So that answered that one really quickly and easily.
Are we going?
Yeah,
I mean, I can leave at any time.
Just mute that. John asked, where can we view Vanessa's video on making your portfolio stand out? We can post that in the Facebook group that we have, and we'll post it back on our LinkedIn page today after this as well, to make sure that you can find it that way. Or just go to our YouTube channel and scroll back a little bit and you'll find it there. It's our most popular video. Nikki, if you worked on a project that you're presenting in your folio after a year of finishing the project, are you still up for intellectual property? Is there an expiring on ownership as such? Look, ultimately, when a company engages you as a freelancer, they're engaging your skills to create something for them. And so they are going to retain that intellectual property right. So it's not even down to a year or something like that. They essentially own that work because it's part of that transaction. There's no reason why you can't approach them and say, do you mind if I include that in my folio? I literally had that happen this morning, and I'm moving closer as that siren goes past.
Yep.
Yeah, right, that's gone. I literally had that happen this morning, and most clients will appreciate the fact that you are doing the right thing by asking them and not just taking the work and doing it. And I imagine some places are going to have an issue with it, while others are going to be like, no, it's absolutely fine. She did a great work on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, as long as it's accredited correctly, if you were just doing the finished art or you're doing the copywriting or the design, then just label that as such.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've covered all the questions now. My goodness, because it's 2:00. We've
there's a lot there.
Yeah, we have gone through. If anyone does have any other questions, where can we access previous webinars, please? Asks Tim. If you go, a couple of places. You can go to our website, which is www.creativerecruiters.com.au. And if you look in the blog section there, you'll find individual blogs based around the previous webinars. Alternatively, if you go to Facebook and look for the Creative Recruiters Virtual Meetup group, you'll find all of the individual webinars in there, along with other topics.
And also, the links are usually on our LinkedIn company website, so Creative Recruiters on LinkedIn, and also on YouTube. Wow, I didn't think we had them in so many places, Lawrence.
We really like to get them out there. And some of the previous ones, if this is your first one, some of the previous ones have been things like your own personal brand style guide. We had a guest speaker about updating your CV. We've done things on mental health, on creativity and isolation. I think it's about webinar number 7 or 8.
I think we're pretty close up to 8. I think if you go to Creative Recruiters has its own page on YouTube. So type in Creative Recruiters on YouTube, and they're all there. They're under Lunch with series, so they're all there in order.
And if you have any topics that you would like us to discuss, because we're trying to do things that are both recruitment-based and non-recruitment based, because, quite frankly, in these challenging times, you don't necessarily want to hear recruitment rah-rah all the time. Sometimes you want it to be about creativity or branding or anything like that. So if there's anything that you would like us to run one on, perhaps you're interested in presenting on a topic yourself, let us know, because we'd love to have people guest present. We'd love to be able to make sure that what we're doing with this time is going to be of value to anyone who kindly comes along and spends this 1 hour with us.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Okay. Well, with that, thank you everyone for coming today, and I'm hoping that we'll see you all next week for the next one.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank
See
you.
ya.